Comrades, you have to go in once more. It's not about Berlin anymore. It's not about the Reich anymore. These were the words of General Walther Wenck in the final days of World War II. They signified a turning point as the war reached its devastating conclusion. But who was Wenck, and why did he choose to defy Hitler's orders at such a critical moment? His story is one of duty, humanity, and the difficult choices made in the face of a collapsing regime. Wenck's early military career. Before World War II, Wenck briefly served with the Freikorps, a paramilitary group, before enlisting in the Reichswehr, the military of the Weimar Republic, in 1920. By 1939, he had risen to the rank of major and became chief of operations for the 1st Panzer Division. During the invasion of Poland, Wenck was awarded the Iron Cross 2nd Class, and just 2 weeks later he earned the Iron Cross 1st Class. His strategic leadership during the rapid capture of Belfort, France in 1940 led to his promotion to colonel. In 1943, at just 42 years old, Wenck became a general, making him the youngest in his branch. His swift rise earned him the nickname the Boy General, as most generals were significantly older. By 1944, he was serving as Chief of Staff for Army Group South Ukraine. It was during this time that he caught Hitler's attention with a blunt but accurate report about the Eastern Front. Wenck described it as full of holes like Swiss cheese. Although his wording got him reprimanded, Hitler appreciated his directness. The war turns against Germany. Despite his rapid career growth, Wenck was now facing a war that was spiraling out of Germany's control. The Wehrmacht's early victories were being overshadowed by catastrophic defeats on both the eastern and western fronts. On July 22, 1944, the newly appointed Chief of Staff, Heinz Guderian, selected Wenck as his Chief of Operations. Then, on February 13, 1945, after much debate, Guderian convinced Hitler to make Wenck the Chief of Staff of Army Group Vistula under Heinrich Himmler. This gave him the authority to launch an attack. A near-fatal accident. Although Wenck initially had some success, Hitler demanded he attend daily Führer briefings, which required a 320-kilometer round trip. On February 17, exhausted from the grueling schedule, Wenck took over the wheel from his driver. He fell asleep while driving and crashed. He was pulled from the wreckage with serious injuries, including a fractured skull and broken ribs. While he recovered in the hospital, the planned attack ultimately failed. Commander of the 12th Army. By April 10, 1945, as Germany's military situation worsened, Wenck was appointed commander of the 12th Army, positioned west of Berlin. His army soon became a refuge for hundreds of thousands of German civilians fleeing the advancing Soviets. At one point, Wenck's forces were feeding over 25,000 refugees a day. Meanwhile, on April 21, Hitler ordered Waffen-SS General Felix Steiner to launch an attack against Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov's First Belarusian Front, which was closing in on Berlin. But Steiner didn't have enough men or tanks, and instead of attacking, he asked for permission to retreat. By April 22, with Steiner's forces withdrawing, Hitler turned to Wenck's 12th Army as his last hope to save Berlin. At the suggestion of General Alfred Jodl, Wenck was ordered to stop fighting the Americans to the west, and instead turn east to assist General Theodor Buss's 9th Army, which was already surrounded. Together, they were supposed to break through the Soviet lines and relieve Berlin. A hopeless mission. At first, Wenck's forces made some progress toward Berlin, but outside of Potsdam they were stopped by heavy Soviet resistance. By April 27, Soviet troops had completely encircled Berlin, and it was clear that there was no hope of breaking through. Wenck reported back to the German High Command. An attack on Berlin is no longer possible. Realizing the futility of Hitler's orders, Wenck made a crucial decision. Instead of throwing away more lives in a hopeless battle, he chose to save as many civilians and soldiers as possible from the advancing Red Army. The Great Escape through the Halbe Forest. Wenck directed his forces toward the forest of Halbe, aiming to rescue the remnants of the 9th Army and open an escape route for civilians. This was an incredibly dangerous operation. Wenck's forces had to fight their way through enemy lines while providing shelter and supplies for the refugees. He carefully identified weak points in the Soviet defenses and adapted his escape plan in real time. As the first refugees and soldiers reached the Elbe River, morale soared. They were heading toward American-occupied territory, where they hoped to surrender peacefully rather than fall into Soviet hands. A legacy of saving lives. Wenck's decision to disobey Hitler's orders ended his military career, but it also saved tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of lives. His decision wasn't easy. The Nazi military oath demanded absolute loyalty to Hitler, and defying orders meant putting himself in grave danger. However, with refugees flooding the roads and Berlin's fall imminent, Wenck knew that obeying Hitler would only lead to senseless slaughter. By April 28, 1945, he confirmed to High Command that Berlin could not be saved. Instead, his focus remained on evacuating as many people as possible across the Elbe River. Despite Soviet artillery and air attacks, his forces managed to ferry thousands of soldiers and civilians across to safety. In the final moments, Wenck himself was one of the last to cross the river. After the war, on May 7, 1945, Wenck surrendered to the Americans. He was held in U.S. custody until 1947, after which he transitioned to civilian life. He later became an industrialist, serving as managing director of DRC Auto & Company, producer of industrial ovens, and later as director of the Diehl Group, an arms manufacturer. How history remembers him. Historians recognize Wenck as a brilliant military strategist and a master of improvisation. However, by April 1945, even the most talented generals couldn't save Berlin. Instead, Wenck is remembered for making a moral choice, prioritizing human lives over blind obedience. In 1957, he was invited to become the Inspector General of the Bundeswehr, West Germany's post-war military. However, he declined the offer when his demands for greater authority over the armed forces were not met. On May 1, thank you for watching. That's it for today's video. If you found this story interesting, check out our other videos on WOR German generals. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more WOR content. See you in the next one.